Research by the Institute of Race Relations reveals what most South Africans really want from government. And this comes as we wait to hear what President Ramaphosa will say in his State of the Nation address tomorrow. The institution will reveal its latest findings in the series of Hope reports entitled Unite the Middle. Well, to tell us more, we're joined this morning by Marius Roodt from the Institute. Marius, good morning.
Morning.
So before we get into what South Africans want, which South Africans did you actually speak to? I mean, is it a representation of everyone, from what we term poor to those who are...
Yep. So we interviewed over 1,000 people, and we did it towards demographically representative, so the correct proportion of blacks, white people, and as I say, with income levels and so on, and also regionally. So we're pretty confident it was a broad overview of South Africans and a correct one.
So what are they most worried about at the moment?
Well, it's stuff that you wouldn't that you would expect. It's things like people want high levels of employment, want better education, low levels of crime. People actually worried about drug abuse and drug addiction, which was actually quite high, that was one of the surprising findings. But two things that were quite low on what people wanted was the land reform. Only 2% of respondents said they thought that government should focus on that, and speed and action against racism. That was also actually quite low on what respondents said government should focus on. Now, that's also not to say that racism doesn't exist, but it's, that was not identified as a priority by people that we spoke to. Same with land reform. That's not to say that people don't think land reform is important, but it's not what they were identified as one of the priorities for the government.
So it seems to me like what they want is stuff that needs to be done urgently, things that are actually going to put food on the table for them, issues of the pocket that they need some relief at the moment.
Yes, I think so. I mean, it's as I say, it's creating jobs, it's making ensuring that people's children go to good schools and so on. And I think that is what the government needs to focus on, and that's what if we want South Africa to succeed, that's what the government needs to make a priority right now. I think jobs is probably the most important issue facing us.
Do they come up, or do they have any suggestions for you as to the how they would like this to happen? I mean, you know, we can all sit at home and say, just make it better, provide the jobs. But were there any ideas? No,
that wasn't really the kind of survey that we were conducting. We were just asking people what you think the priority should be, and also was also a broader survey asking people what their attitudes towards race relations and other groups of people in South Africa.
Okay, and did you get an indication at all as to whether they are hopeful that President Ramaphosa is the man who can pull this off? Was there any sentiment expressed that way?
It's hard to say. I mean, we saw in the election that the ANC lost quite a lot of support and the lowest election results ever. But still, I mean, the ANC did receive over 50% of the vote. So you'd have to say that people do generally probably have confidence in Ramaphosa, although it was also the lowest turnout ever we've had in a South African election since the end of apartheid. So a lot of people also just checking out of the the political system, which is actually also a cause for concern.
So can we say they're cautiously waiting?
I think that's probably. Okay. I think it's probably people are taking a wait and see approach at the moment. I mean, the president hasn't been president for 18 months, so but I mean, we had a terrible economic results, or the GDP. Shrank the last figures we got, so I think the president does have his work cut out for him on a number of fronts. So.
Well, I suppose he's starting on his own slate now, as opposed to having taken over, you know, in the middle of everything previously. So I just want to chat a bit about your series of Hope reports and Unite the Middle. Tell us a bit about that and what you're focusing on.
So this is a series we've been doing. I think this is the fourth in the series. We've been doing them about every 2 years, and we ask South Africans what they see, how they feel race relations are, and so on. And this might come as a surprise to a lot of people, but race relations are actually pretty good in South Africa. And one of the most heartening findings from this latest report was that nearly 90% of South Africans across all race groups feel that they need other South Africans of other race groups for this country to be a success. So we believe that there's a large, moderate middle of people, probably over 80% of South Africans, who want to work together and want to build the country together. And I think our Hope reports have shown this over the last 6 or 7 years that we've been doing them. And I think we can see from how we came through 1994 that there was a moderate majority of South Africans who decided to work together to achieve democracy and go forward. Of course, there have been setbacks and so on, and South Africa has some serious problems that we are facing. But we do believe that there's a large, moderate majority of South Africans in the middle of our politics who want to work together and want to look past things like race and so on, and create a country that works for everybody who's in it.
Well, I'm very interested about the actual land findings as well. I mean, considering government is putting such an emphasis on land reform and what needs to happen, that people, it's not high on their radar at the moment. I mean, why?
Well, I think people know that if you get a piece of ground, that's not necessarily going to give you a job or create
so
a
they
good
understand
school.
that.
Exactly.
Okay.
But also I think, I'm not sure we can say that the government is putting a lot of emphasis on land reform apart from rhetoric. We've still seen there's the budget that the Department for Land Reform or the Agriculture Department and for land reform and so on is still very low. I mean, there's more money goes to VIP protection than goes to land reform. So
yeah.
I think
in terms of the noise, I mean.
Yeah, it's only, so we have to ask, how is the government actually committed to land reform? I think that's there's a big question mark there, I think.
Okay, well, let's see if the president does meet these expectations and if these worries, and I'm sure a lot of these will form, the top part of his list of priorities. Thank you very much, Marius Roodt, from the Institute for Race Relations. Just their findings on what the expectations are of the president.